Mayor, to our treasurer, to our clerk in her brief absence, to administrative staff here in the council chambers, our chief of staff, our city attorney. Today is Monday, January 27, 2025, and this is the City of Romulus City Council Special Meeting Study Session. This meeting is for an audit presentation by Plant Moran for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. Mr. Chair, roll call was taken at the previous special meeting, and the same quorum remains for this special meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Tonight's special meeting agenda is as follows. Number 1, roll call. 2, agenda. 3, discussion, the audit presentation for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. Number 4 is public comment. Number 5 is adjournment. A motion would be in order to accept tonight's special meeting agenda as presented.
So moved to accept the special meeting agenda as presented.
Support. Been motioned by Ms. Talley, supported by Mr. Kraut, to accept the special study session agenda as presented. Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. Kraut?
Yes.
Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Ms. Abdo?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion approved.
Thank you, City Council. Number 3 is discussion, and to lead our discussion is Bill Brickey from Plant Moran.
Okay, thank you and good evening. So as mentioned, I'm Bill Brickey with Plant Moran, the audit partner on your engagement. And with me tonight are a few of my associates, Phil and Will. So yes, your audit team is Bill, Phil, and Will. So kind of funny. So as mentioned, we're here to talk.
Yes.
Where's Stacy?
Stacy's not here tonight. She is still involved in the audit as our colleague partner, but she is not able to make it tonight.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So really want to spend some time highlighting some of the audit deliverables. So hopefully what you received in your packet is really there's 4 separate documents that we're going to highlight tonight. You have the city's financial statement, which is obviously the large document that we mostly think of when we think of the audit. We have our audit of federal awards, which is a separate audit of the city's compliance with federal grants. We have our report to mayor and council, and finally we have the graph presentation that we'll go through in just a moment. So before we get to the graph presentation, just want to highlight a few other things kind of outside of the financial results, but really more related to audit-specific manners. So we have covered all of these documents in detail with management before they were issued, and our goal tonight really is to highlight a few things and certainly address any questions you may have related to the audit or the audit deliverables. Before I get started, just want to take a quick second, thank Maria and your entire finance team for all their assistance throughout the audit. The audit does take several months to complete from start to finish, and they just did a great job cooperating with us and helping us get through the audit in an efficient manner. The first thing I want to point out is our main deliverable to you as your auditor is our opinion on your financial statements. So if you look in the financial statements, starting on page 1, you would see our opinion. The city did receive what we refer to as an unmodified audit opinion, again in the current year, which essentially means the statements are in compliance with all the rules and regulations, and you can rely on those numbers. So I always like to highlight that. In addition to that, I want to spend just a minute and talk about the separate audit that we did. So because the city received over $750,000 in federal grant funding, we had to do an audit of your compliance with the spending of those federal dollars. So this report that you would have received is entitled Federal Awards Supplemental Information. So in the current year, the city received about $950,000 of federal grants, and we specifically tested your compliance with the spending of $450,000 of the Small Business Administration Congressional Funding Grant. So this was done to essentially enhance small business development in the city of Romulus. Happy to report that during our testing of that, we concluded that the city did comply with the parameters of that grant, and we have no findings related to your compliance with the federal award. So really good news there when it comes to that single audit of federal grants. You will notice, though, included in that report on page 11, we did have one financial statement audit finding that we need to report to you tonight. So essentially, when we come out to do the audit, the expectation is that the numbers that are presented to us don't need to change as a result of our audit procedures. So to the extent we find something that needs to be corrected, we need to report that to you. And we did have one item in the current year, so when we were doing our testing of your accounts payable cutoff, we identified one invoice that was reported in 2024 that really related to 2025. So we suggested that adjustment, the adjustment was made. But because we did find that, we do have to report that as a finding, and again, you'll see that on page 11. Again, there's thousands and thousands of transactions, and so it's not unusual for us to find something through all of our audit procedures. But again, because we did find it, we did have to report that to you in that letter. We've also issued our report to mayor and council, which is the 3-page letter in there, and that's really related to various audit-related documents that we have, or attestations that we need to go through with you. I'm happy to report, when you look at that letter, essentially, except for the one item I just discussed with that cutoff issue, we had no other problems with the audit. So everything went smooth. We had no issues with management, no disagreements. So when you look at that letter, it's very kind of standard with a lot of general language in there. So overall, the city continues to have strong internal controls, and your team really does a great job maintaining the financial records and getting ready for the audit. So what I'd like to do now is switch over and look at some of the numbers. So what we've done is we've summarized some of the key financial data from the financial statement and just put it in graphic format. So we'll cover that in the slides here, and then certainly if there's questions as we go through, we're happy to address them as you have them. So with that, I'm
Through
going
the
to
chair.
Yes, sir.
I do have a question about
Sure.
the finding that you had.
Yes.
Because we also had that same thing in 2023, so I'm trying to figure out how do we correct this that's ongoing and start, it's a pattern.
So it is one of those things, again, the expectation is if I find one adjustment, that's a finding. So I know over the years, we've had, more things, and your finance department continues to work on ensuring that when they close the books and prepare for the audit, they catch everything. But again, it's not uncommon on most of our clients for us to have something.
The same thing?
Well, I think the nature of the finding is the same, meaning we find something as part of the audit. I think the underlying transactions have been different over the years. So this one was specifically related to a construction invoice, whereas in the past, I think there's been other adjustments related to, I believe, the recording of like pension and OPEB liabilities and different things. So it is something where it's always, something where the finance department wants to pitch the perfect game, so to speak, and have no errors identified during the audit. And I think you've put a lot of good controls in place so that when someone's doing something, someone else is reviewing it. But again, it's not uncommon for us to find something. Now I will say when it comes to these findings, if they were significant enough, you wouldn't receive that unmodified audit opinion. So again, they're important to be addressed by management, but again, I wouldn't consider this finding something that is going to be, a huge deal for the finance department.
So
to
there's
deal
levels?
with. There's levels, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Okay, we'll kind of jump into the graphs, and again, happy to address questions as we go through everything here.
Thank you, Bill. So, as Bill mentioned, I'll be going through the financial graphs with you. What we want to do here is try to help summarize some of that 80-plus page document into a couple of important slides that we think bring our key information that we want to call out. So we always like to first start off with our general fund, and really we like to talk about the general fund revenue and transfers. So this year, revenue for the general fund decreased about 3.9 million, but that was expected. So, and I'll go into that in a little bit. So your property tax revenue did increase about 260,000 from increase in taxable values. But where there was some decrease was in the prior year. You may recall we did recognize the full amount of the city did recognize the full amount of the ARPA funding that was received, which was about 2.4 million. So that was a one-time payment, so we would expect that decrease to occur. As well as one of the other major significant items was license and permits. So there was some significant permits pulled in the prior year. As you can see, it went all the way up to 5.2 million in 2023. So that kind of dropped back down closer to average, or historical average at 2.2. But there was just some significant infrastructure, some significant permits and projects, and so that revenue, decreased this year. Countering that, though, was a little bit of the investment income. So you'll see from 2022, you actually had a loss, all the way to now in 2024, about 1.6 million in investment income. The next slide will now look at your general fund expenditures and transfers out. So overall, your expenses increased about 1.5 million. Of that, 520,000 related to general government. In that case, most of that, 450,000, related to operating expenses of the court that were paid by the city. So these relate to a revenue shortage in the court to cover budgeted expenses. Your public safety transfers were up 2.2 million, but this kind of counters your public safety actual expenses. We're down 2.5 million. So what happened was in the prior year, when recognizing that ARPA funding, some of the public safety expenditures that would have been in the public safety fund were recognized in the general fund where the ARPA revenue was recognized. And so when recognizing that 2.4 million of revenue last year, you had 2.4 million of expenses in your general fund. So we would expect to see that decrease, but since the general fund does transfer to the public and safety, that's why your public safety transfers went up. And then also Public Works increased about 1 million, and that was just due to increase related to several sidewalk projects. The next slide we have here, we wanted to show all the way back to 2012. So this is your unassigned fund balance, or would be fund balance that isn't restricted or legally assigned for any other purposes. And what we wanted to show was from the dip in 2013 from the recession. You can see that steady growth with some years where it did decrease just from certain projects. But really that growth from about 1.2 million in 2013 all the way up to 11.3 million in 2024. And just really in the past year, there was about a $1.2 million increase from revenues exceeding expenses. And it's important to note that when we're showing these numbers, it doesn't include any balances that may be assigned. So these would be such as balances assigned for subsequent year's budget, which has about 4.8 million, or 1.5 million assigned for public services. And really what we like to kind of do a comparison is overall the unassigned balance to your annual expenditures, which we would say, which is 53%, which we would consider to be healthy. We have the next couple of slides we want to show is really, we like to break down the dollar and show for every dollar collected, how much of that actually goes to the city for city millages and operations compared to other taxing authorities. So this slide is just kind of showing the dollar perspective with the green representing the amounts that relate to the city millages or operations. Really the key point from that slide that we have on the next is just showing that for every dollar collected by the city, only 30 cents goes to the city for municipal operations. The rest go to other taxing authorities. And so this pie chart here really shows 12% goes to the city for some restricted, like public safety, library, 18% relate to the city operating, and then the rest are going to those other taxing authorities like the schools and the county. So as I kind of discussed earlier, this graph is showing the public safety fund and looking at your property tax revenue and comparing it to the expenditures to show that what's being collected for property taxes, there are still other expenditures in excess of that. So as mentioned, the general fund does transfer about in this past year, transferred 8.6 million to the public safety fund to cover those expenditures. And what you won't see in this graph, so the city did receive the Protecting Michigan Pension Grant. That was about 8.5 million as well. And so really what that was, the reason we're not showing it is we didn't want to skew it because it would be 8.5 million in your revenue and then 8.5 million in expenditures offsetting each other. But that was recognized, and we'll actually show in a couple slides when we look at pension, how that impacted that. But overall revenue, property tax revenue did increase about 260,000. But the expenditures also increased about 2.4 million. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of going to be theme. With the ARPA funding in the prior year, there was about 2.4 million that was recognized in general fund instead of public safety.
Through the chair.
Yes,
Can you
Ms.
repeat
Talley?
what you just said? 260,000 is revenue increase from taxes, and expenses were what?
Expenses increased 2.4 million.
Help me with that, man, real quick.
So in the prior year, in the public safety fund, 2.4 million that would have been in expenditures there was recognized in your general fund, just
Okay.
because that's where you recognize the ARPA funding.
Okay, no, I'm good, thank you.
Yep. And so this next graph we have right here is showing those transfers from the general fund, and you'll kind of see, as mentioned, with that 2.4 million being absorbed by the general fund in 2023, the total transfer was 6.4 million. Once again, because general fund was just incurring some of those expenses, so they didn't have to transfer anything to public safety. This year, it's 8.6, and then just with increase in expected wages and other costs, the expected budget amount for 2025 is 11.3 million. And so we would really say that 2023 would ever be the lowest that you would expect, just because of the way of recognizing the expenses in another fund. So really, 2023 would be the lowest. The next slide we have here is the water and sewer fund. And what we're looking at here is working capital. So this would be any cash or investments or anything that could be converted into cash in less than a year, and comparing that to any liabilities, any payables that would be due within a year. And so what this is showing is that your current cash and investments and other assets that can be converted within a year are 12 million higher than your current liabilities. And then you can see, the important part is you can see that trend up now from going down. And this is really important because it's a sign of liquidity in case you ever were to need access some funds for a significant project. You can see that you do have that excess of current assets over your current payables. And then finally, the last graph we like to talk about is legacy costs and really looking at the liability changes. So what's good is you can see that this year the graph is, it's continuing to shrink a little bit, but there was significant shrinking this year. So in really doing that, you'll see that your OPEB liability decreased significantly, about 19.3 million. And that was primarily due to adjustments in expected and actual experience. So what this was from switching to the Medicare Advantage, that just had a significant savings, which the actuary factored in. And then for your pension, that decreased about 9.7 million, and this is where, as I mentioned earlier, that really market performance as well as that $8.5 million state grant contribution really helped to lower that liability. So that's all we really had on the graph. Is there another question?
Any questions from council? No questions from council.
All right, if
Proceed.
there's no more comments or discussions from council, that brings us to number 4, the public comment. This is the portion of the agenda for those in the audience who would like to address the city council regarding tonight's special meeting agenda. If you would like to address the city council, please raise your hand, and after being acknowledged by the chairperson, approach the podium and state your name. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Any additional time will be upon the consent of the chair.
Any comments from the audience? No comments from the audience. Close the part out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 5 is adjournment. The time is 6:49.
So moved.
Been motioned by Mr. Wadsworth, supported by Ms. Abdo.
No, Kraut.
Mr. Kraut?
Yeah.
For adjournment. Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Mr. Kraut?
Yes.
Ms. Abdo?
Yes.
Ms. Tally?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion approved.